In December of 1817, the quiet farming community of Robertson County, Tennessee, was about to be shaken by one of the most famous hauntings in American history. It all began on the Bell family farm, where a series of strange and terrifying events unfolded, centering around the head of the family, John Bell, and his daughter, Betsy Bell. John Bell was a respected man in the community. He had moved to Tennessee from North Carolina with his wife, Lucy Bell, and their children several years earlier. They owned a large plot of land, worked hard, and were known for being kind and honest. But in the winter of 1817, something dark and unnatural came into their lives, something that would leave the family and their neighbors in fear for years to come. The haunting began in the most ordinary of ways. John Bell was out in his fields one evening, inspecting the crops before winter fully set in. As the sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the land, he noticed something strange. At the edge of his field stood a large, dark animal, a creature he didn't recognize. It looked like a dog, but much larger, with glowing red eyes that stared directly at him. Startled, John reached for his gun and fired a shot. But when the smoke cleared, the creature was gone. John didn't think much of it at the time, assuming it was some wild animal that had wandered onto his property. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. A few days later, strange noises began to echo through the Bell home. At first, it was subtle. Scratching sounds on the walls, faint tapping on the windows. The family brushed it off as rats or the wind. But as the days passed, the noises grew louder and more frequent. Soon, they could hear the sound of chains dragging across the floor, heavy thumps and knocking that seemed to come from nowhere. Then, the attacks began. Betsy Bell, John's young daughter, was the first to experience the physical torment. While she was sleeping in her bed one night, she felt something yank the covers off her and slap her across the face. She screamed for her parents, who rushed into the room to find her bed in disarray and her face red with the marks of a hand, though no one else was in the room. From that night on, Betsy was repeatedly attacked by an unseen force. It would pull her hair, pinch her skin, and slap her with enough force to leave bruises. The attacks happened every night, and soon the entire family was affected. They would hear voices whispering in the dark. Objects would move on their own, and invisible hands would strike them without warning. As the months passed, the haunting grew more intense. The Bell family wasn't just dealing with mysterious noises and physical assaults anymore. They began to hear a voice, faint at first, like a distant whisper, but gradually it grew louder and clearer. The voice spoke in a mocking tone, laughing at their fear and suffering. At first, the voice wouldn't reveal who or what it was. It would simply cackle and taunt the family, sometimes mimicking their voices or reciting scriptures in a twisted, mocking way. But eventually, it began to call itself Kate. The voice claimed to be the spirit of a woman named Kate Batts, a neighbor of the Bell family who had died several years earlier. There had been a long-standing feud between John Bell and Kate Batts over a land dispute, and many believed that this haunting was her way of getting revenge from beyond the grave. Whether or not this was true, the Bell family had no doubt that something malevolent had taken hold of their home. As word of the haunting spread, neighbors and friends began to visit the Bell house, hoping to witness the strange events for themselves. And they were not disappointed. The spirit, or whatever it was, seemed to enjoy an audience. It would speak to the visitors, sometimes answering their questions or repeating conversations they had had earlier in the day. It even seemed to know details about people's lives that it shouldn't have been able to know. One evening, the Bell family invited a local minister to stay with them and witness the haunting firsthand. As they sat around the fireplace, the spirit began to speak, reciting Bible verses and singing hymns. But soon, its tone turned dark, and it began to curse and threaten the minister, telling him that he would suffer the same fate as John Bell if he didn't leave. Terrified, the minister left the house and refused to return. The haunting continued to escalate. Betsy's torment became so severe that she could no longer attend school. Her health deteriorated as the spirit's attacks grew more violent. John Bell, too, began to suffer physically. He developed a strange illness that left him weak and bedridden for long periods. His face would swell, and he often felt as though he was being choked by invisible hands. The story of the Bell Witch became so well known that even Andrew Jackson, the future president of the United States, decided to investigate. Jackson had heard rumors of the haunting and was intrigued by the stories of a malevolent spirit tormenting the Bell family. In 1819, he gathered a group of men and set out for the Bell farm. As Jackson and his men approached the property, their horses suddenly stopped in their tracks. No matter how hard they tried, the horses refused to move. Jackson, realizing that something supernatural was at play, reportedly exclaimed, "By the eternal boys, it is the witch." Moments later, a disembodied voice echoed through the air, taunting Jackson and his men. It laughed and told them that they could proceed, but warned that they would be met with more trouble ahead. Jackson, never one to back down from a challenge, continued on foot to the Bell house where he spent the night. Throughout the night, Jackson and his men experienced the full force of the Bell Witch's wrath. Their blankets were ripped off them while they slept, and invisible hands slapped and pinched them. In the morning, Jackson is said to have left the Bell farm, declaring that he would never return. By 1820, John Bell's health had worsened significantly. The spirit had made it clear from the beginning that it wanted John Bell dead, and it seemed determined to make that happen. John was plagued by mysterious seizures and bouts of paralysis. He could no longer work on the farm, and his once strong body grew frail and weak. On December 20th, 1820, John Bell passed away. His death was sudden and unexpected, though many believed it was the result of the spirit's torment. On the morning of his death, a strange black liquid was found in a vial near his bed. No one knew where it had come from or what it was, but the spirit later claimed that it had poisoned John Bell. At his funeral, the spirit could be heard laughing and mocking the grieving family and friends. It sang loudly, disrupting the somber proceedings and ensuring that even in death, John Bell would find no peace. After John Bell's death, the haunting slowly began to subside. Betsy Bell, who had been the spirit's primary target, grew up and eventually moved away from the family farm. The torment she had endured as a child left her scarred, both physically and emotionally, but she managed to build a new life for herself away from the Bell Witch. However, the spirit was not entirely finished with the Bell family. It continued to visit sporadically, though its appearances were less frequent and less violent than before. The last known encounter with the Bell Witch occurred in 1828, when the spirit allegedly returned to speak with John Bell's son, John Bell Jr. It claimed that it would return again in 107 years, though there are no records of any such event happening. The Bell Witch haunting has become one of the most famous ghost stories in American history. Over the years, the story has been retold and embellished, with new details and theories emerging about the true nature of the spirit. Some believe that the haunting was the result of a curse placed on the Bell family by Kate Batts, while others think it was a poltergeist or demonic entity. Skeptics have suggested that the entire haunting was a hoax, possibly orchestrated by Betsy Bell or one of her siblings. They argue that the physical manifestations of the spirit, such as the scratches and bruises on Betsy's body, could have been self-inflicted, and the disembodied voice could have been the work of a skilled ventriloquist. However, there are many who firmly believe that the Bell Witch was a real, malevolent entity that terrorized the Bell family for years. Today, the Bell Witch legend continues to captivate people's imaginations. The Bell Farm is now a tourist attraction, and visitors from all over the world come to see the site where one of the most notorious hauntings in history took place. The Bell Witch Cave, located on the property, is said to be one of the most active paranormal hotspots in the United States. While the truth behind the Bell Witch haunting may never be fully known, the story endures as a chilling reminder of the mysteries that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be discovered.